A lot of pop culture characters have pretty interesting ways of getting around. Some have flight, some super speed or teleportation, and some have incredible vehicles like Batmobiles or invisible jets or TARDISes. But no hero out there has a mode of transportation nearly as iconic or dynamic or exciting as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Spidey's web swinging is a staple of the character, and almost every promo image or poster of Spider-Man shows him flipping and spinning and spiraling through the air, catapulting off his elasticy webbing. And all the best adaptations of Spider-Man have had creatives behind them that knew they had to nail Spider-Man swinging for an audience to really feel fully satisfied with their time watching, reading, or playing the webhead. When Insomniac's Spider-Man PS4 game was coming out in 2018, people weren't asking if the story would be good or the graphics would be up to par. The question on everyone's mind was, will the web swinging be good? And this hasn't always been such an important part of the character. Since his creation by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Spidey has always been able to web swing, but the dynamism of his movement wasn't made the incredible spectacle it's often depicted as today until a man named Todd McFarlane got a hold of the character in 1988. The Canadian-born comic writer and artist is known for a few major comic achievements. He helped popularize and arguably co-created the first incarnation of Venom, and a few years later created Spawn. But I think his biggest impact on the world of superheroes was his reworking of the aesthetic of Spider-Man. By 1988, McFarlane had already made a name for himself as a talent to watch through work at Marvel and DC, but Spider-Man is where he really became a legend in the industry. He took an already iconic character and totally changed how he's drawn to this day. Not in terms of his costume, but in terms of his movement. McFarlane knew that Spider-Man's bones are meant to be elastic and more flexible than an average human, and he drew the acrobatic wall crawler in poses that reflected that fact, which led to panels like this. Almost unsettling to look at, but far more dynamic than any other poses we'd seen from the webhead before. McFarlane took Spider-Man from this to this. Spidey's limbs contorting into impossible angles as he flipped over enemies and spun through the air, stopped being an occasional feat and became a core mechanic of how the web-slinger moves. Nowadays, Spider-Man is arguably more well known on the silver screen than in comics, and I think he's only worked on the big screen because his films started being made in an age when CGI became good enough to do his web-swinging justice. In the early 90s, James Cameron almost helmed a Spider-Man film starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Peter Parker and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Doc Ock. That isn't a joke, that really almost happened. And I'm personally glad it didn't. While James Cameron has always pushed the boundaries of what filmmakers can do with special effects, I doubt that he could have achieved what Sam Raimi did with the effects at his disposal in 2002. In the Raimi films, while some of the character models at times look a little out of place from a modern moviegoer perspective, it's easily forgivable because the speed and weight of Spider-Man's movements almost always felt real. And even if the quality of Spider-Man's movies varied after that one, the web swinging just kept getting better and better. This actually takes me back to my one minor criticism of Spider-Man Homecoming, which is barely a criticism at all, as I commend the filmmakers for their reasoning behind it. In an effort to keep the character fresh, the writers decided to actively avoid everything we'd seen too much of in other Spider-Man movies before. This included Spidey sense, Uncle Ben's death, Peter gaining his powers, and sweeping New York web-swinging sequences. And while I think they were right to do that and the film was better for it, there was a small part of me, and I emphasize very small, that felt a bit shortchanged that we didn't get any hugely memorable web-swinging scenes. Even my personal least favorite Spider-Man movie has web-swinging shots I remember fondly. But with so many other things done right in Homecoming, along with a few good web-swinging moments, it was a very easy thing to forgive. And about now is the time when I'm tempted to get into Spider-Man's depictions and animations, but if I do that, I'll just end up ranting about how incredible Spectacular Spider-Man is for hours on end, so I should get to my wrap-up. But seriously everyone, if you're even remotely a fan of Spider-Man, I highly recommend you go check out that show. It may be my favorite iteration of the character. Ever. And none of this praise towards Spider-Man's web swinging being the most iconic thing about him are meant to undermine the other great things about Peter Parker. He was one of the first genuinely relatable mainstream comic book superheroes, and that will always be the most important thing about him. And of course I know there are a lot of other characters in the Marvel canon that currently have Spider-Man's web swinging abilities. Silk, Miles Morales, Venom, Carnage, and a whole crazy array of other dimensional Spider-Man. But none of that changes the fact that Peter Parker Spider-Man was the character that brought this incredible dynamic form of movement into the pop culture canon. And no matter how many times anyone tries to draw Batman swinging around like Spider-Man, his grapple hook is not the same as Peter Parker's web swinging. Sorry Batman, you're pretty great too, you just don't move like Spider-Man. And I really hope that one day someone figures out a new, cool, inventive form of movement for a superhero or pop culture character. But for now, at least in my mind, no one out there can match the incredible, dynamic movements of the Amazing Spider-Man. Thanks for watching everybody, please subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when my videos come out. They're coming out every Monday now, and if you have a character that you really like that you think is as dynamic as Spider-Man when it comes to movement, let me know in the comments below. Alright everybody, have a good week. Goodbye.